Hey everyone! Did you know that up to 80% of strokes in the United States are preventable with lifestyle changes according to the CDC? 80%. In this video, I'll talk about what the top 10 modifiable risk factors are for having a stroke and explain why they put someone at a greater risk. And if you've already survived a stroke, you can still work on these factors to reduce the risk of having a secondary stroke. As you might expect, the difference between modifiable and non-modifiable risk factors is that with modifiable ones, you can change your behavior and therefore decrease your risk. Non-modifiable risk factors are things that you can't change. Things like age, race or ethnicity, certain medical conditions, and genetics. My name's Elise, and I am an occupational therapist and a certified stroke rehab specialist on a mission to make stroke information simple. I am trying to grow my channel to make sure that more stroke survivors and care partners have access to this type of information. So if you find this video helpful, please like and share this video with anyone that you think it might help. Subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications on when I post new videos. All right, let's dive into the top 10 modifiable stroke risk factors. We've known for years that smoking is a bad habit. This hasn't stopped Big Tobacco from continuing to advertise and lobbying against health-saving measures at the state and federal levels. But what makes smoking so bad for us, and how does it increase our risk for stroke? You probably already know that smoking causes lung damage. You're actually 25 times more likely to develop lung cancer if you smoke, according to the CDC. But what you might not know is the impact that smoking has on your blood vessels. It can actually cause our blood vessels to narrow and blood to thicken. Smoking can also cause damage to your blood vessels because it raises your blood pressure by causing your heart to pump harder and faster to get blood through those narrowed vessels. That sustained blood pressure pushing on your blood vessel walls constantly will cause damage. Picture a garden hose without a sprayer nozzle attached. When you were a kid, did you ever put your thumb where the water comes out? You'll notice you get a much stronger spray by narrowing the opening of where that water comes out. That's similar to how blood pressure works in narrowed blood vessels. The damage to your blood vessels can also cause clots to form, which we know cause 87% of all strokes in the US per the American Heart Association. So the treatment is clear: stop smoking. The action of this is actually a lot harder than just saying it out loud. Smoking is an addiction. Talk to your doctor. They may start you on certain patches, medications, or nicotine gum to help you start weaning yourself off of tobacco products. And if you can, find a support group who will understand the struggle that you're going through. The fuss and hubbub around having high blood pressure are present for a reason. Chronically elevated blood pressure causes the walls of our arteries to weaken, narrow, and become damaged over time. This can create an opportunity for a clot to form, which we know can lead to an ischemic stroke. Or consistent high blood pressure can lead to blood vessel rupturing, which can cause a hemorrhagic stroke. Think about that garden hose example again. It takes a lot more force to squeeze liquid through a narrowed space. Raised blood pressure puts a strain on the heart muscle too. The heart has to pump more often and harder due to the need to push blood through those narrowed arteries. Chronic high blood pressure is one of the primary causes of hemorrhagic strokes. While genetics, race, and ethnicity, things that you can't change, do play a role in developing high blood pressure, there are still modifiable risk factors that you can work on. The biggest lifestyle factor that you can change is diet, specifically to cut back on sodium in your diet. Why is that? At a chemical level, water always follows salt. When you overconsume salt, an excess amount of water follows that salt into your blood vessels. This extra fluid in your blood vessels causes increased blood pressure. If you're thinking about changing your diet to decrease sodium intake, you may want to check out the DASH diet, or the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, to get some ideas. I'll leave a link in the description below to the Mayo Clinic's write-up on the DASH diet for you. How does high cholesterol impact stroke risk? When we have too much cholesterol in our blood, particularly low-density lipoprotein, or LDL, also known as bad cholesterol, this can cause fatty buildup in our blood vessels. These fatty deposits are known as atherosclerosis. The buildup of fats in our blood vessels can cause narrowing, stiffening, and weakening, which can all lead to high blood pressure. Bits of fat can also break off and travel through the body. If it becomes lodged in a blood vessel in the brain, that can lead to an ischemic stroke. If your doctor has put you on a statin to help you control your cholesterol, don't stop taking it unless they tell you to. It's really important. Like with high blood pressure, there are controllable and uncontrollable components that affect the likelihood of developing high cholesterol. With that said, there are some lifestyle modifications you can make to lower your risk. The biggest factor to decreased cholesterol level is to reduce the amount of saturated fat you eat. Saturated fat is typically found in animal products, think like meat, butter, dairy, etc., deep fried foods, and cakes and pastries. I know, all the stuff that tastes really good. But here's the good news. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to go on a completely low-fat diet. It just means that you need to be eating better quality fats. Unsaturated fats like avocado, olive oil, nuts, and seeds, as well as certain types of fish. Try swapping out a few bad fats for good fats and see what you think. Almost 1 in 10 Americans have type 2 diabetes. And most people understand that diabetes results from high blood sugar or glucose, but some may not realize why it happens and how it impacts our bodies over time. Type 2 diabetes is known as insulin-resistant diabetes. I was actually watching a presentation on foods that improve brain health put out by UC Davis Health. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested in watching it. The presenter, Dr. Liz Applegate, gave an excellent analogy for type 2 diabetes. She described insulin as a teacher. Insulin, which is a hormone produced by the pancreas and is responsible for glucose control. She compared blood glucose to students waiting in the hallway or the blood vessel to get into a new classroom or a body cell. The insulin knocks on the door of the body cell to try to allow the glucose to enter. When someone has type 2 diabetes, the cell doesn't always hear the insulin knocking at the door, so it won't let the glucose in. This results in a pileup of glucose in the bloodstream. Dr. Applegate asked the audience to imagine what it would be like if you let a bunch of young students go crazy in the hallway. Well, you'd probably see some damage. When glucose builds up in our blood vessels and our bloodstream, this can cause damage to our blood vessels. It can also cause an increase in blood pressure, cause the vessels to stiffen, and result in the buildup of fatty deposits in our blood vessels. If you have type 2 diabetes, talk to your doctor about an appropriate medication regimen. It's also necessary to make sure that you're getting enough physical activity and eating the right foods to better manage your health condition. Worldwide obesity has tripled since 1975. In 2016, 39% of the world's adults were considered overweight. And in 2018, 73.6% of the US adults were considered overweight or obese. There are a lot of reasons why obesity has increased globally over the past 50 years. From 1970 to 2008, the average daily calories consumed per person increased by approximately 600 calories. Since the 1970s, the number of fast food restaurants in the US has doubled. I bring up these statistics to share that this problem is widespread and it's not going away anytime soon. We all know that we need to be at a healthy weight, eat healthy foods, and move more. But actually doing those things is kind of complicated. If it was easy, everyone would eat well, exercise often, and be at a healthy weight. Aside from the statistics that I just mentioned, There are so many factors that influence whether or not someone will become overweight or obese. They include genetics, the social environment and the culture that you grow up in and are around, food availability, knowledge of diet and activity, personal psychology, and several neurohormonal cues that aren't very well understood. So we know that being overweight or obese is bad for our health. But how does obesity actually impact stroke risk? Being overweight or obese increases the risk of developing diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, which is a type of heart rhythm disorder that can lead to stroke, and obstructive sleep apnea. I've already talked about how diabetes, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure can put someone at increased risk for having a stroke. In addition to those factors, increased adipose tissue or fat has been found to be an active player in increasing inflammation in our bodies. Also leads to the buildup of fatty deposits in our blood vessels and can contribute to insulin resistance, which results in high blood sugar. The key to making sustainable changes is moving away from an instant gratification mindset and making very small changes. When we start on a weight loss journey or a journey to better health, it's normal to not lose weight instantly or to hit multiple plateaus. Weight loss is not a linear process. You're not going to go from point A to point B in a smooth fashion. There are ups and downs. Making small changes is one of the best ways to start on a big journey. You can commit to swapping out one side of chips with carrots, or walking a quarter of a mile before moving to something more. And if you haven't read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, I highly recommend it. It changed my life. It's absolutely amazing. There's a lot of science behind it. I will leave a link in the description below to that book. We know that moving less can contribute to overweight and obesity, which can lead to increased stroke risk. I want to cover how physical activity benefits our minds and bodies. Aside from keeping you looking good, regular physical activity can improve your mood. When we exercise, our bodies release endorphins, serotonin, and it increases dopamine production. This improves our level of happiness and can help mitigate effects of depression. In addition to making us psychologically feel better, regular physical activity also helps stimulate glucose uptake and the body's sensitivity to insulin. In plain language, that means that it can help lower blood sugar. If you do have type 2 diabetes, make sure that you talk to your doctor before starting a new exercise regimen, as you'll need to take certain precautions. Regular physical activity also improves the strength of your heart. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard to pump blood when it's stronger. It can pump more blood with less pumps. This is super important as it helps increase the efficiency of your heart and will usually end up lowering your blood pressure. As I mentioned in the previous section, if you start making changes, remember, they need to be small in order to make them actually sustainable. Only commit to 5 minutes of activity, or maybe 10 jumping jacks, whatever you're capable of doing and that doesn't seem too overwhelming to start out with. Break your activity up into 5-minute chunks through the day versus one 30-minute session. There are ways to make getting the recommended amount of physical activity much more sustainable. You don't have to go whole hog and do 30 minutes all at one time. You can schedule them in little chunks throughout the day. What we eat also plays a big role in stroke risk. Eating foods high in saturated fat and sodium can be destructive to our bodies. As I mentioned in the high cholesterol section, saturated fats are primarily found in animal products like butter, cheese, etc. The reason they're so detrimental to our health is because they raise that LDL cholesterol, or bad cholesterol. Increased blood cholesterol can cause a buildup of fatty deposits, which can lead to blockage and clots. Ultimately, that increases stroke risk. I also talked a little bit about sodium and its role in increasing blood pressure. Because water follows salt or follows sodium, the more salt that we eat, the more water follows it into our bloodstream. That increased fluid in our blood vessels causes our blood pressure to increase. If we eat a high sodium diet all the time, our blood pressure remains chronically elevated. So what can you do? Again, commit to very small changes. Swap out a bad quality fat for a good quality fat. For example, if you normally cook with butter, try substituting olive oil in instead. Or try eating a serving of salmon once a week instead of maybe a steak or other type of red meat. Lower the amount of salt that you add to the foods you cook at home, and also try to limit the amount that you go out to eat. We know that restaurants and fast food joints are notorious for putting excessive amounts of salt in their food. What we drink also impacts stroke risk. The research keeps ping-ponging back and forth between moderate alcohol is protective against strokes to alcohol intake should absolutely be avoided. What we do know for certain is that drinking too much alcohol can increase our blood pressure. The Mayo Clinic reported that chronically binge drinking can lead to chronically elevated blood pressure. We've talked about why and how increased blood pressure affects our stroke risk. Heavy alcohol intake can also lead us to make unwise decisions. Because alcohol decreases our inhibitions, we may be more prone to reach for foods that we're trying to stay away from, especially high-fat, greasy foods. It may also keep us from regularly engaging in physical activity due to either being drunk or hungover. You're definitely not going out for that 2-mile jog in the morning if you're hungover. It's important to remember that alcohol can also interfere with certain medications. If you're on blood pressure lowering medications or a statin to lower your cholesterol, you should definitely talk with your doctor about drinking in the first place. Stress. We all experience it in some form or another. Certain situations in our lives will cause us to feel more stressed than others. The really negative effects of stress and increased stroke risk happen when we stay in a chronic state of stress. If we don't know how to handle and cope with our stress, it can cause some pretty serious physical and mental health issues. Chronic stress can cause inflammation in the body. It can also cause our heart to work harder and raise our blood pressure. Stress is problematic in its own right as we all respond differently. Some of us don't eat at all when we're really stressed out, while others overeat. And when we overeat, we tend to reach for foods that are really satiating, high in fat and sugar. These types of foods stimulate the reward centers in our brain and make us feel temporarily happy, but they don't solve the underlying problem. And subsequently, they make the situation worse by increasing blood cholesterol and blood pressure. Finding healthy ways to cope with stress is necessary to mitigate stroke risk. This could be finding a fun hobby that you enjoy, spending time with a loved one or time outside, or reaching out to a mental health therapist or counselor if you need a little extra help. The importance of understanding what your medications are for, what your doses are, and how often to take them can't be overstated. By now, you know that high cholesterol, blood pressure, and diabetes all play a large role in increasing stroke risk. You should know if you take any medications for these conditions, and if you're unsure why you're taking any specific meds, reach out to your doctor or to their nurse to clarify. Knowledge is power. Understanding your medications is the first step to making sure that you take them as prescribed. By taking your medications as you're supposed to, you will ultimately reduce your stroke risk. All right, those are the top 10 modifiable stroke risk factors. Remember, in the US, up to 80% of strokes are preventable. And if you've already survived a stroke, implementing lifestyle changes now can help reduce your risk of having another stroke in the future. So make a plan, start small, reduce your risk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.